Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto's life shifted, from Ninja Academy to a harem of Tenten, Yugito, Akane and allies, Part 2. Training grows harsher, bonds grow deeper, and Naruto's hidden potential finally begins to awaken. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start. Chapter 3, Meeting Konohamaru. 2 days later. It was early in the morning as Naruto went about his daily exercise routine. Anko had gone on a mission today, so she was not here with him like she had been the past couple of days. Not that he was going to complain, the woman's training method may be effective, though if you asked Naruto it was more torture than training, but he really had no desire to come home looking like a walking bruise today. Not to say his training had not been progressing well. Even Anko had been impressed by how quickly he was learning, though her way of saying that was, wow. Keep this up and maybe you won't continue. Yeah, not exactly the nicest thing for someone to say when giving out compliments. Still, he would not complain about her or her training methods. Each day they sparred or he would be forced to run from her in the forest of death. He would last just a little bit longer, meaning he was just a little bit stronger than he had been when first starting. And really, wasn't that the whole point in training? Naruto's chakra control was getting better. He could now float 5 leaves on one hand, each of his fingers, and rotate them. His clones were beginning to work on the other hand now. It was his hope that he would master this soon and then get started on tree climbing, since the idea of being able to walk on a solid vertical surface was the coolest thing he could think of. Even if he had promised not to do pranks, he could just imagine all of the potential that ability would have had for his pranking career. His taijutsu was better, still nowhere near enough to beat a jonin like Anko, or even one of the better chunin, but it was still good enough that Anko had been impressed with the short amount of time it took for him to learn it. Normally during their training, Anko would literally tear his taijutsu apart, picking the entire style apart piecemeal. Often when she found a weak point in his guard, or an attack that would overstretch him, she would take full of advantage of it, beating him into the ground before telling him what he did wrong. After all, there was nothing like getting your kick to make sure you really did not want to get your kicked again. His physical strength also had increased a bit. His arms weights were now at 30 pounds while his leg weights were at 40 pounds. The ability he had to increase his weights faster than normal was thanks to his healing factor. Naruto had found out that when his muscles ripped or his bones broke, the Kyuubi's chakra would come out of the seal and heal his body, making it twice as strong at the break. It was probably the one good thing that had come with the Kyuubi so far. Bujutsu was a bit slower than the other things he was trying to learn, especially since learning to use a weapon was a completely new experience unlike taijutsu. He was still getting better every day, but learning to use a staff was harder than everything else he was working on. Surprisingly enough, it was his studies in Fuinjutsu that made the biggest leap. He had been told that the art was one of the hardest to learn. However, Naruto seemed to take to it like a fish to water. He had already read the basic book and was reading the first level intermediate book. His ability to actually make seals was a little slow, having been forced to make his handwriting perfect so that he would not accidentally make some mistakes on the seals and have it blow up in his face. Still, he understood the subject well, and had hoped that he would eventually be able to create some seals without it killing himself. He had also learned a few new jutsu that Anko had decided to teach him. The first one was the Kunai Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Kunai Shadow Cone Jutsu, in its shuriken variant. It was a simple C-rank jutsu that multiplied the amount of kunai thrown and was used for mass bombardment of an enemy's position. The jutsu required little control, and for someone like Naruto who had learned the Kage Bushin in 1 hour, this jutsu was simple. Aside from that, he had also learned the Bushin Daibakua, Great Exploding Clone. This had in all honesty become his favorite jutsu. Basically it was a shadow clone that you simply overloaded with chakra to make it explode. The key to doing this was to send a large dose of chakra to the clone in one go, rather than gradually building chakra in it like when he created reinforced clones. Other than that, his aim with kunai and shuriken had gotten better. He could now hit a moving target with some degree of accuracy. He had also found the limit to his seemingly limitless energy, though that had come from spending several hours playing death tag with Anko in the Forest of Death. The last of Naruto's accomplishments was with his issue of money. Originally he had been tempted to go and see if Kato would be willing to let him work there for money, however he had decided against it since the man had already been so kind to him and he did not want him to lose customers for having the demon brat working for him. The solution had been for Naruto to create Kage Bushin and have them henge into regular people. They would go and find a job to earn money and he could continue his physical exercise. So far he only had 2 of them that found a job. A female clone with long black hair and brown eyes he had named Akira, and a male clone that looked like an older version of him except with brown hair and gray eyes. Neither of them had whiskers, called Kian. Akira had managed to get a job working as a waitress for one of the Akamaiki-owned barbecue restaurants. Surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly, the girl was a hit. Of course Naruto had learned from Enko that appeal goes a long way towards being popular, with guys at least, and since Akira was basically just his Warok no Jutsu with some minor altercations, different colored hair, eyes and wore clothes, she was very, very popular. His other clone had gotten a job working as a clerk for a grocery store. Of course he knew there would be a problem with the 2 clones later on. Eventually Naruto would be forced to leave Konoha for missions. When that happened he would not be able to make his clones to do their jobs. But he was trying to work on a solution for that, and had even already thought of a possible answer. But it would have to wait until he got better at Fuinjutsu. Looking up at the sun as he finished his daily routine, Naruto realized it was time to get back home. Today was his last day to exercise before getting his Jonin sensei assigned. Tomorrow was Sunday and he had decided to get some rest. After all, the body, even his body needed rest in order to keep from burning out. Naruto ordered his clones to dispel in groups before heading back to his apartment. The next day. The next morning Naruto got up and started getting ready for the day. After getting showered and dressed, Naruto moved into the kitchen where one of his Kage Bushin was trying to make, breakfast. Naruto had decided to change his diet to a more healthy food than just ramen, having read that he needed to have more balanced and nutritious meals if he wanted to get taller, something he was desperate to do, even desperate enough that he would stop eating just ramen to do it. His clones had only recently started cooking, so nothing they made tasted all that good. But at least they hadn't burned the house down yet, so Naruto was counting his blessings. After eating his meal Naruto left the house, locking the door before leaving. Hopping onto the roof of his building, the blonde made his way towards the Hokage Tower where he would get his ninja registration and photo ID. Naruto smiled as he made his way towards the academy so he could present his photo and registration to the Hokage. Walking in the door where the old man was, Naruto greeted him in the way that only Naruto could. He slammed the door open and shouted, "Yo Oja-san. I've got my registration." Sarutobi smiled as he looked up. "Ah, Naruto, how?" Sarutobi trailed off as he looked over at Naruto. He blinked as he took in the change of clothes that the blonde was wearing. The orange jumpsuit the blonde had was gone. In fact, Sarutobi could not see anything other than the large cloak that the boy was wearing since it went all the way down to his ankles. He had only managed to catch a small glimpse before Naruto had moved his hand away from the door, but what he had seen was infinitely better than that orange jumpsuit he used to wear. The boy actually looked like a real shinobi with that outfit. It was surprising actually. He had not seen Naruto since the incident, in fact no one seemed to have seen him since then. It had actually caused a bit of commotion among the villagers who had feared some kind of grand prank from the prankster king. Sarutobi himself had been concerned that the boy may have had some trouble coping with the new knowledge that he held the Kyuubi. However, it seemed as if he had been worried over nothing. Shaking himself from his thoughts, Sarutobi offered the boy he thought of as his grandson a smile. "Well, this is certainly a surprise, Naruto-kun, though I am glad you took my advice. I like the new look, you look like a true shinobi." Naruto blushed a bit in embarrassment. "You think so? Well, I thought if I was going to be a real ninja, I should change into something that made me look a little more ninja-ish." Sarutobi chuckled a bit. "Indeed, I take it you are here to give me your registration." Naruto nodded as he gave the old man a grin. "Yep." Walking up, he handed Sarutobi his ninja ID and registration. Naruto moved over to one of the seats and waited for Sarutobi to approve it. After a few moments of studying the information in picture, Sarutobi nodded. "The picture looks good. I can see you have matured greatly. Naruto beamed at the old Hokage's praise. To be honest, I expected you to do something like paint your face, or some other childish act. Hey! Naruto shouted indignantly, standing up and pointing at Sarutobi. I've grown up since then. I'm not some brat who would do something like that anymore. I'm an adult now. Sarutobi just gave the boy an amused expression. Yes, that is true, you do seem to have grown exponentially this week. I was merely talking about what you would have done before. Naruto calmed down slightly at that and gained a sheepish expression. He probably would have done something like that before. Well, I suppose you're right. Sarutobi smiled before remembering something. I forgot to mention something important the night of the incident, Naruto. Sarutobi began, catching the blonde genin's attention. Due to the fact that you were able to root out a traitor to Konoha and keep the Forbidden Scroll safe, I have listed it as your first B-rank mission. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise at the new knowledge. So I want you to come to my office later today so you can receive your mission pay. Really? Naruto asked. At Sarutobi's nod, he pumped his fist in the air. That's awesome. My first B-rank mission and I only just started as a genin. I'll be Hokage in no time with this kind of track record. Sarutobi just chuckled at the overenthusiastic blonde. I am sure you will, Naruto. Speaking of Hokage, you might as well give me that hat right now, Oji-san. Seeing as how I beat you that night, Naruto said with a grin. Sarutobi blushed a bit, remembering just how he had been beaten. I am afraid that did not actually constitute as a fight, Naruto-kun, the old Hokage replied smartly. Therefore I can't actually give you my hat. Oh, Naruto asked with a devious smirk on his face. So if I were to beat you now, would you? Maybe you need a little reinforcement of just how badly you lost. Sarutobi paled as he saw the blonde putting up a familiar hand sign. Naruto, wait, don't. Waroke number jutsu. A cloud of smoke covered Naruto, and when it cleared enough to see, it was no longer Naruto that Sarutobi was looking at. He was now staring at a young blonde woman who looked to be about 18 years old. She had long blonde hair that was done up in two pigtails which traveled down to her butt. Her face was heart-shaped and lightly tanned, and she had a set of sky-blue eyes that held an alluring quality to them. She had a small nose, and on either side of her nose were three symmetrical whisker marks that seemed to add an exotic quality to her. Her lips were a light, moist pink that contrasted a bit with her skin and gave her a pouty and seductive expression. Her body was what one could only describe as perfection. Luscious-looking C borderline D cup that, while not as large as his former student Tsunade, were amazingly round and perfect. A narrow waist with a flat-toned stomach led into flared hips with a perfectly round and firm butt. Going down even more were a set of mile-long legs that seemed to go on forever. She was also completely with only small bits of smoke covering certain key areas. Yet that only seemed to add to her allure, leaving just enough to cover her with and make you want more. The Sandaime Hokage took all of 4 seconds to notice these key features about the woman. When he did, it only became a matter of time before he gave the inevitable perverted reaction. Boom! Like last time, the old Hokage was thrown back as a geyser of blood flew out of his nose. Ha. Looks like I got you good, Oji-san. Naruto shouted as he turned back into himself with a puff of smoke and held his stomach while trying not to fall on the floor. A few seconds later, Sarutobi managed to pull himself back up and set himself in his chair, dabbing his nose with a tissue. That jutsu again, I must admit it's very clever, but very dangerous. I'm going to have to list it as a kinjutsu. Naruto blinked as he looked over at the old man. So you're going to make this a forbidden technique? Sarutobi nodded. It seems much too dangerous to be placed in the wrong hands. The grin that stretched across Naruto's face threatened to split it in half. That's awesome. Huh. I just graduated and I already made a kinjutsu. I'll be Hokage in no time. Sarutobi looked at Naruto with an expression somewhere between amusement and exasperation as the blonde did a victory dance. Naruto, he watched as the blonde completely ignored him and continued dancing. Naruto. His voice was a little louder, hoping it would catch the blonde's attention. When it didn't work, he shouted, Naruto. What is it, Oji-san? Naruto asked as he stopped his victory dance. You need to calm down, you're a shinobi, remember? Reminded Sarutobi. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck as a sheepish grin crossed his face. Right, sorry. Sarutobi sighed, I swear sometimes. The old Hokage was interrupted as the door opened and a little kid rushed in with wooden shuriken in his hand. Now I've got you, old man. The child yelled, after I defeat you I'll become Hokage. Naruto blinked as he watched the kid run. He was wearing a head cap and a blue scarf that was several feet too long for him. If he keeps running like that he's going to trip. As if on cue the young boy's feet got caught up in his scarf and he tripped, landing flat on his face. Oh wow. The boy yelped as he put his hands on his face and rolled back and forth along the floor. Oh boy, Sarutobi thought as he sighed, if it's not one thing, it's another. The old Hokage pulled his Hokage hat down over his face in embarrassment. Naruto merely stared at the kid, wondering how the hell he could actually be dumb enough to wear a scarf that was so large. At the same time a man wearing dark plain clothes and sunglasses appeared in the doorway, panting a bit. Gah, dang, did someone set up a trap to trip me? The kid shouted as he sat up, holding his head. Honorable grandson, are you alright? The man wearing the sunglasses asked. And pardon my observations but there are no traps here, the surface is completely flat. The man said as he regained his composure, pushing his sunglasses up on his nose in what Naruto thought was a snooty gesture. Naruto just continued to look on at the scene, one eye twitching. Kami, I don't think even I'm that clumsy. The boy got up from the floor and looked around, noticing Naruto staring at him. At the same time the man with the sunglasses spotted Naruto as well. It's him, the Kyuubi brat. He's the worst kind of troublemaker around. The man thought as he sneered at Naruto. Naruto however did not notice the man's sneer of disgust as the boy stomped up to him and pointed. It was you, wasn't it? You're the one who tripped me. He accused angrily, pointing a finger at him. Naruto's first reaction was to smack the kid, but he took a calm breath. It would not do for a ninja to hit a civilian. Slowly and deliberately Naruto reached out and grabbed the boy's scarf, flinging it back and forth in front of the child's face. This, Naruto said in a slow voice as if talking to someone who was retarded. Is what you tripped over. Seriously, if you're going to wear something like this, get one in a smaller size so your clumsy feet can't trip over it. No, 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 no. The boy shouted as he stomped his feet on the ground. You did it. I know you did. Just admit it, you coward. That was enough for Naruto, no one called him a coward. Standing up Naruto lifted the boy off the ground by the scruff of his shirt. Now you listen here, you damn brat. Naruto shouted through gritted teeth. I'm not a liar and I'm not a coward. You should be more careful when you're speaking to a shinobi, or someone might just end up putting you in your place. Uzumaki, take your hands off of him this instant. The sunglasses man shouted. He is the honorable grandson of our leader Sandaime Hokage-sama. Naruto paused as he turned to the man in the sunglasses, thinking about what he said before turning to the kid in his grip. Huh, so this brat's related to the Hokage Oji-san. Naruto thought since the sunglasses man did not have any reason to lie to him. That's right, the boy thought with a smirk. He's just like the rest, stopping from doing something as soon as he learns who I am. Feeling confident that nothing would happen to him now, the young boy took this opportunity to gloat. What's the matter, tough guy? I thought you were gonna teach me a lesson. Afraid because the Sandaime Hokage is my Oji-san. Despite being held up in the air, the young child puffed out his chest. Naruto's eyes twitched several times. I don't care if he's your Obaa-chan. Naruto yelled as he dropped the boy on the floor and smashed a fist onto the top of his head. Konohamaru, who had tried to get up from being dropped, fell back to the floor as Naruto smashed a fist on his head. This guy's different, thought Konohamaru as he hit the ground again. The man wearing the sunglasses looked scandalous. He just assaulted the honorable grandson. Sarutobi merely sighed and shook his head. What a mess, he muttered. Damn brat, Naruto grumbled. He looked up at Sarutobi. I'll be heading Oji-san, I need to clear my head. Naruto walked out of the room grumbling about stupid brats, needing to learn their place. The sunglasses man whirled on his leader. Hokage-sama, how could you let that? He stopped as soon as he noticed his leader's harsh gaze. That delinquent do something like that to your grandson. He must be punished. Punished? Sarutobi questioned, raising an eyebrow. For what exactly? It's not like he did any permanent damage, Ebisu. And Konohamaru did deserve that for questioning and insulting Naruto-kun the way he did. The old Hokage sighed. Now then, if you could take care of this, he gestured over to Konohamaru, who was sitting back up with a groan. Honorable grandson, are you alright? Ebisu asked, helping the boy to his feet. Hey, where'd that guy go? Konohamaru asked, looking around. He had to find him. That guy was different from the others, he didn't treat him special just because of who his grandfather was. Ebisu looked at Konohamaru with a frown as he pushed his glasses up. Now you must listen to me, honorable grandson. You must not associate yourself with juvenile delinquents like that, nor should you attempt to draw him into a conflict even if he does deserve it. Ebisu lectured the boy. He is far beneath you, so you must not stoop to his level. As your distinguished Jonin sensei, I am never wrong about these things, which means I am always right. Ebisu smirked to himself as he turned to look at the village through the open balcony on the left side of the room. I'm above the more mundane trainers, so you must heed my every word. Your goal is to become the next Hokage, and I can teach you the best way to go about it. Indeed, stick with me and you will gain the shortcut to becoming Godime Hokage. You understand, don't you, honorable grandson? Ebisu asked as he turned around, only to find himself talking to thin air. Where did he go now? Ebisu wailed. I believe he followed Naruto, but I have no idea where they're headed. Sarutobi offered up in a calm and casual tone as he lit his pipe. What? Ebisu shouted in shock and consternation. This is a disaster. Ebisu ran out of the room and down the hall. How did Konohamaru-kun turn out to be like that? The old Hokage had to wonder, sighing a bit as he took a puff of his pipe. He's quite determined. That was his 10th sneak attack today alone. He thought to himself as he blew out a few smoke rings. Although if he hangs around Naruto he might learn a thing or two. He paused in his thoughts and grimaced. At least so long as Naruto doesn't teach him anything tricky. The image of a blonde woman quickly sprang to mind before he banished it. Sighing, Sarutobi looked down at the paperwork he had gotten from Naruto and began to read it over. Naruto sighed to himself as he walked down the street, the confrontation with the little boy already placed in the back of his mind. As he wandered around the village, the blonde tried to figure out what he should do. Today was supposed to be his rest day, so he wasn't going to be doing any training. However, because he had told himself that he would no longer do any pranks, he didn't really have anything else to do. Maybe I can go visit Tenten, Naruto thought. He had not really spoken to her much, but she had treated him like a normal person, unlike most of the people in this village. Though she may be out of the village or with her team. I could just go and look at some of the equipment since I need to buy some more kunai and explosive notes. Naruto made a silent curse to Anko for making him waste so much equipment on those damn monsters in the Forest of Death. Then he sighed, of course it would only be looking since I don't have as much money right now, and what I do have I need to save for my housing bills. Naruto's thoughts trailed off as he noticed a cloth that was near the fence that was designed to blend in with it, except that it was dirtier than the rest of the fence. And being held sideways. And there were a pair of hands holding it up on either side, and a pair of feet sticking out of the bottom and a small tuft of hair sticking out of the top. He can't seriously think that's going to work on me, does he? Naruto thought with a sweat drop. Sighing, he went over to the camouflaged child and grabbed the cloth, pulling it down. I take it you want something, seeing as you're following me. Naruto asked in a bored tone. He really didn't feel like dealing with this brat right now. I'm impressed that you saw through my disguise, your reputation is well earned. Konohamaru said with a large smile as he pointed at Naruto. So that settles it. I'll be your apprentice and you'll be my trainer. Naruto blinked. What? He asked slowly, as if not understanding. Yeah, you gotta teach me that Waroke no Jutsu thing you used to beat Oji-san. Konohamaru shouted as he bounced on the balls of his feet. Hey! Hold on, who said anything about me teaching you? Asked Naruto. What the hell was with this brat? Thinking he would just up and teach someone he did not even know. Come on, please say yes, boss. Konohamaru begged. What, boss? Naruto asked, tilting his head in a quizzical expression. Yeah, that's right, you're the boss. Boss. Konohamaru shouted as he jumped up and down. Naruto looked up at the sky as he scratched the bottom of his chin. Well, he was getting bored and had been trying to find something to do. Well, I suppose I can give you some pointers, but it will only be for today. Naruto said, looking at the overactive child pointedly. What? Konohamaru cried out, looking ready to complain. Why only today? Because tomorrow I have genin orientation, so I won't have any free time after that. Naruto said with a smirk as he pointed to the headband on his head. Or did you not notice the headband? Konohamaru looked at the headband and his eyes widened. Sugoi. That's so cool. I suppose it is. Naruto took a step back at the boy's enthusiasm. Anyways, let's head over to one of the parks. Naruto smirked as he jumped up onto the roof of one of the buildings. It was one of his more recent accomplishments, being able to jump that high by using his chakra. But it did a good job of making Konohamaru get all starry-eyed. I hope you can keep up. Naruto shouted and began to jump to another building. Konohamaru, who did not have the chakra control for that, had to travel on the ground. Naruto always made sure to stay in the boy's sight as he hopped across the rooftops, making sure that the boy had to make a concerted effort to follow him. He made sure to circle the parks at once or twice before heading over there. By the time they had reached the park, Konohamaru was stumbling and falling over as he panted for breath. He fell down onto the ground as he looked up at Naruto, who was sitting on a tree branch a few feet above him. What was that for? Konohamaru asked as he tried to regain his breath. Naruto frowned at how tired the boy was. Are you in the academy? He asked. Konohamaru looked indignant, or as indignant as an exhausted 8-year-old could look. He stood up only to fall back down. Of course I am. What are you doing sitting on the ground like that? Interrupted Naruto. Stand up. Konohamaru glared at him. I'm tired from you making me run all over the place. Naruto shrugged. That wouldn't even constitute for my morning runs. If something as mildly strenuous as that made you tired, then you're obviously not training your body enough. Man, this is weird. The blonde thought. I wonder if this is what Iruka-sensei felt like when he gave me a lecture. He had to admit that, while it felt odd, it was also satisfying to actually be able to teach someone else. Maybe there really was a point to all of those boring lectures Iruka-sensei gave. Anyways, Naruto shook his head of thoughts on Iruka. Since you're so exhausted, it's obvious that your chakra reserves are too small to do anything more than the basic jutsu. So I think we'll start with. Hey! Konohamaru shouted with an angry expression on his face. I am not small. Naruto face-palmed as he listened to the little kid. Please Kami, tell me this is not how I sounded to Iruka-sensei and Oji-san. If it is, I swear I'll never be such a brat again. I said your chakra. Chakra. Naruto pronounced the word chakra extra slowly. I made no comment on your height. I am merely saying that your chakra reserves are a tad on the small side. This means you'll have to work on getting your reserves up to snuff. I'll write down a few exercises I found in a book and give them to you to practice on your own. Naruto paused for a moment. Though if your reserves are smaller, then you should have better control. Tell me, how good is your chakra control? He asked. Well, I don't really know much about that, Konohamaru admitted. Four Eyes Sensei hasn't gone beyond what the academy has already taught me. Naruto sighed and rubbed a hand over his face. Which means you have had absolutely no practice in chakra control. He paused. Come to think of it, he hadn't been taught chakra control exercises either. Though, he had assumed it had been one of the days he had been sent out of class, or skipped. He frowned to himself before shaking his head. Have you at least been working on the Henge no Jutsu? Please tell me you have. Konohamaru puffed up his cheeks indignantly. Of course I have. Alright, no need to get defensive. Naruto held up his hands in a defensive gesture as he jumped off the tree branch. So show me what you can do. I need to see how far along you are, before we can start doing anything. What should I transform into? Asked Konohamaru, scratching the back of his head. Naruto shrugged. Anyone, it doesn't matter so long as I can see where you're at. After that I'll show you some material I have to create your own version of the Waroke no Jutsu. The thing about the Waroke no Jutsu is it requires an innate understanding of the female body, or at least it does now. Naruto thought with a snort and a light blush. He had read 1 or 2 books on anatomy, and one of them was on female anatomy, as well as a book on the reproduction system. Plus all that time he had spent with Anko this past week had pretty much guaranteed that he would know what certain female parts looked like. Naruto shook his head to clear. "Alright, let's see what you can do." "You got it, boss," Konohamaru shouted as he did the hand seal for the jutsu. Quote, "Henj no jutsu." Ebisu scowled as he looked out across the village from the roof he was standing on. He had been searching the village for the better part of an hour, and it was getting on his nerves. Where is that filthy delinquent? What could he be doing to the honorable grandson? It could only be something truly evil. Ebisu thought viciously as he clenched his hands into fists as he scanned the streets. "I am an elite jonin. As one in a long line of senseis that have shaped and guided potential candidates to the illustrious position of Hokage, I cannot allow such a disaster to occur on my watch. I'll crush any insect that clings to my student, even if it is a Jinchuriki." Without a second thought he began hopping across the roofs, searching for any sign of the blonde brat or his wayward student. Naruto sighed as he dropped some change into a vending machine to get himself some soda. If only vending machines ended up taking over for shops, then I wouldn't go broke because of stupid prejudices. He shook his head of the thought, knowing that thinking something so negative would do him no good. Turning around he looked at his temporary student. The boy had done remarkably well for his first time, though Naruto could see signs of exhaustion setting in. Naruto attributed his success to the fact that he had less chakra, therefore more control to use jutsu, making learning something like this easier. Walking over to Konohamaru he sat down, popping his soda can and taking a long gulp. "So, tell me, what was going on with you and Oji-san?" It didn't seem like this was a singular event. "Oji-san named me Konohamaru, after the name of the village. He said it would bring me luck," Konohamaru murmured. Naruto nodded to himself as he listened. You'd think that it would be easy to remember. But no one, not a single person in the whole village ever calls me by my name. It's because when they look at me, they don't see me, they see the honorable grandson of the Sandaime Hokage. Naruto raised an eyebrow as Konohamaru kicked a rock. They don't see who I am, just who I'm related to. It's like I'm invisible, hidden behind Oji-san's shadow, and I'm so sick of it, that's why I'm going to become Hokage now. So people will know who I really am. This kid has the reverse problem of me. Naruto thought incredulously. He's still basically ignored, but it's more of ignoring who he is, rather than his existence. The kid reminded him a lot of himself, how he used to be before the Mizuki incident. Not that something like this would make Naruto give the kid any sympathy. If anything, Konohamaru needed ant-kicking. Naruto snorted. You think it's that easy? Konohamaru looked up at Naruto. If you could become Hokage so easily, then everyone would try to be Hokage. The Hokage is not just the strongest ninja in the whole village, but he's also the smartest and the one who's dedicated his life to serving the village as its protector. You have to think of each villager as if they were a member of your family and be willing to put your life on the line to keep the safe. That is what being Hokage is about. And it will take hard work, dedication, blood, sweat and tears to get there. Not just anyone can be Hokage. Naruto suddenly grinned. Besides, if you're going to be Hokage, you're going to have to defeat me first. Naruto stopped as he watched Konohamaru, who was gaping at him, waiting for the boy to say something, when he heard a rustling of leaves. I've found you. A voice came from above them. Naruto and Konohamaru turned to see Ebisu standing on a tree branch. That filthy Uzumaki, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Ebisu glared down at Naruto, who could not hold in a flinch at those icy eyes. Those eyes, he recognized them as the same ones that some of the more hateful members of the village gave him. The kind of people who he was sure would kill him if they had the chance. The kind who would try to beat him if they caught him when they were drunk and had lost any inhibitions they might have once had. Leaping down from the tree, Ebisu landed on the ground and approached the two. Honorable grandson, it's time that you return home. Ebisu said in the same overly confident tone as before, adjusting his sunglasses. Konohamaru jumped to his feet. No way. I'm learning how to beat Oji-san and become Hokage. Don't interfere. Naruto couldn't hold in his smirk. It sounds like he thinks I'm a better teacher than you. Ebisu sneered at Naruto. Silence, Uzumaki. I will not just sit idle while you corrupt my student with your rubbish. Shut up, Konohamaru yelled. He's a better teacher than you'll ever be. At least I can understand what he says. Both Ebisu and Naruto were startled by the boy's exclamations. No, no honorable grandson, you must not listen to him. He cannot teach you the things you need to know. To be Hokage one must understand virtue, justice, ceremony, wisdom, loyalty, prudence and be skilled in 1,000 jutsu. You don't even know one jutsu. Ebisu continued. However, it seemed that Konohamaru had heard enough. I'll show you a jutsu. Eat this. Waroke no jutsu. Where before there was a small brown-haired boy, now there was a tall, older and absolutely drop-dead gorgeous female with dark brown hair. How's this for a jutsu? She asked with a seductive voice as she made a pose. Ebisu froze and his jaw nearly fell to the floor. Naruto watched as the man shivered. However, he was still standing. Huh, well, what do you know? Naruto thought to himself. He hides it well. Konohamaru poofed back into existence and frowned. Why didn't that work? He asked, scratching the back of his head. WHWH, what kind of disgraceful jutsu is that? Ebisu shouted indignantly, though Naruto could see the red tinge to his cheeks. Such things are not fit for the eyes of a gentleman. I would never fall for such a vulgar and outrageous jutsu. I am far above such things. Naruto's eyes began to twitch at the bold and obviously false declaration. Ebisu grabbed Konohamaru's scarf and tried to start dragging him back with him. Honorable grandson, you must stop this at once. That Uzumaki brat is turning you into a delinquent. Do you want people to see you as an imbecile? Only with my teachings will you gain the shortcut to becoming Hokage. Ebisu continued to pull on the scarf, trying to drag Konohamaru away. No, no, no. Just leave me alone. I don't want to learn from you, I'm learning from the boss. Konohamaru yelled as he yanked back. What sort of nonsense is this? Ebisu shouted back. The pair continued their little tug of war until Naruto decided to intervene. Kage Bushin no Jutsu. The pair paused when Naruto shouted and turned around to see around 50 clones puff into existence. Konohamaru looked at all of the copies with wide eyes. Come on, why don't you pick on someone your own size? One of the clones shouted. Oh wait, I guess you were doing that. Another clone said. Well, maybe you can pick on someone bigger than you. Another spoke up. Ebisu sneered at the clones as he let go of Konohamaru, and walked into the group of Narutos. I'm not impressed. I am a Jonin, an elite ninja. Not some lightweight like Mizuki. Ebisu pushed up his glasses and gave an arrogant smirk. Yes, I heard of your run-in with Mizuki. And for someone who was pushed away by their own sensei, you have no right to lecture me, upstart. Now, watch closely, honorable grandson, and see how a real ninja fights. Konohamaru looked back and forth between Ebisu and the group of Narutos, not sure what to do, but praying that Naruto could win. Sarutobi sat down in his spying room. Haruka had visited him a little while ago and they had just finished a discussion about Naruto, and he was now watching the events on his spy orb. Naruto may have been fortunate against Mizuki, but this is most likely out of his league. Sarutobi frowned as he put his pipe in his mouth. Ebisu better be smart enough not to hurt him too badly, especially in front of Konohamaru-kun. And I think I'll need to talk to him about his attitude problem. Ebisu stood in the middle of the formation of Naruto's with a cocky smirk in place. This kid didn't honestly think that a technique like this would be enough to beat him, and elite, did he? Well, he asked with a sneer and cocky tone. All the Narutos grinned before putting their hands up in a hand seal. Waroke number jutsu. All 50-something clones shouted, surrounding the area in smoke. When the smoke dissipated, Ebisu was assaulted by 50 very hot and very blonde girls, all of whom began grabbing at him. They began pressing and rubbing themselves against the now shock-stilled Jonin while whispered seductively into his ear, but all of their words were lost as the feeling of their legs and other parts pressing against the Jonin became too much. Ebisu shuddered, before being thrown out of the group of girls by the geyser that was his nose, shooting blood as he flew into the air. Naruto grinned as he saw the now completely unresponsive Jonin twitching on the ground a few feet away. A puff of smoke later, and all the clones dispelled. Turning to his shorter companion, Naruto grinned. And that is what I like to call Harem no Jutsu, Harem Jutsu. Sugoi. Konohamaru shouted, pumping a fist in the air. Sarutobi watched the events that transpired with a shocked look. Naruto seems to have gained quite the dangerous skill. Sarutobi thought. Combining his Warok no Jutsu with the Kage Bushin no Jutsu is a dangerous combination. I don't know if even I could survive that. He reached out and grabbed a tissue, dabbing away at his now bloody nose. Naruto looked at the still twitching Ebisu, satisfied that he wasn't going to be getting up any time soon. The blonde walked back over to Konohamaru. "Aw man, I couldn't even get Four Eyes Sensei to fall for the jutsu. I want to be Hokage so badly, but I keep messing up. Why can't I do it?" Konohamaru grabbed at his hair in indignation. "Because becoming Hokage isn't easy," Naruto said. "You want to be at the top right now, to be Hokage as soon as possible so people will see you for you. I know how you feel. Until recent circumstances I was the same way. But the fact is being Hokage is a long and hard road. You can't just become Hokage because you want to. It takes dedication, skill, hard work. You have to be willing to bleed, and cry, and sweat in order to be the strongest shinobi you can. You have to train both mind and body. But most importantly you have to be willing to risk your life for the sake of this village and its people. And also," Naruto looked at Konohamaru with a serious expression, causing the younger male to gulp. "You have to remember the most important truth about how to become Hokage." "Oh yeah," Konohamaru shouted as he puffed out his chest. "What truth is that?" "That there are no shortcuts to becoming Hokage," Naruto said, his eyes taking on a fierce and determined look. "By trying to take the easy path you limit yourself, you weaken yourself, because you weren't willing to take the harder road. Weren't willing to train until you dropped, or work until you felt all of your muscles straining against each other. No ninja in this village would respect a Hokage who took the easy way out of everything. Sometimes Hokages have to make hard choices and deal with the consequences of those choices. It takes a kind of commitment that very few people have, and those who don't have it need to get out of the way for those who do." Naruto stared at Konohamaru, the boy a little red in the face and looked like his eyes were on the brink of turning into swirls. He was trying to come to terms with all of the information he had just received and felt completely overwhelmed. However, one of the things Naruto had said rang through his mind. "Besides, if you're going to be Hokage, you're going to have to defeat me first." Konohamaru turned away from Naruto and stuck his nose up. "Who do you think you are? Lecturing me like that?" Naruto smirked a bit at Konohamaru's reaction. "That's it. I won't be your apprentice any longer. From now on we're rivals. Got it?" Naruto just gave the kid a grin. "Well, that's cool. This was a one-time deal anyway, because I'm getting assigned to my Jonin sensei tomorrow." However, Naruto's grin widened, stretching the whisker marks and making him look like a fox. "I accept your challenge to be my rival. But keep this in mind, you're going to have a lot of catching up to do if you want to be at my level. You're going to have to train hard if you want to even think of competing against me for the title of Hokage." Naruto looked at the sun and sighed. He had just wasted a whole day training a kid. "Well, it was fun and I was resting today anyway," Naruto thought with a chuckle. It was nice being able to act like nothing more than an overly cocky kid and show off to someone else, something that he knew he probably would not get to do again. "Well, I'm off. But don't for one second think you can just slack off. You never know when we might meet again, and I find out that you've been slacking." Naruto trailed off with the implied threat causing Konohamaru to gulp. "Alright then, I'll see you later, Konohamaru." Konohamaru felt his eyes widen as Naruto turned around and tossed a wave over his shoulder. Sarutobi smiled as he leaned back in his chair and watched Konohamaru give a salute to the leaving Naruto. "Thank you Naruto-kun, for helping Konohamaru-kun true path of a ninja." He sighed. "I just wish he hadn't taught Konohamaru-kun the Warok no Jutsu. Kunai Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Kunai Shadow Cone Jutsu, a basic C-rank jutsu that creates copies of thrown projectile weapons. Used for mass bombardment of enemy positions, distractions and creating distance between the user and his/her foes. Bushin Daibukua, Great Exploding Clone, A-rank Kenjutsu. Basically a Kage Bushin that is overloaded with chakra that will explode either when the user activates it, or it gets hit in some way. Harem no Jutsu, Harem Jutsu, S-rank Kenjutsu. This jutsu is simply a combination of the shadow clone technique and the sexy jutsu. It is used to create any number of clones of beautiful women. This technique is known to many in Konoha as the pervert killer due to the massive nosebleeds many perverts have suffered from it. This includes on Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, who after suffering massive hemorrhaging decided to rank the jutsu as a forbidden S-class ninjutsu and place it in the Forbidden Scroll of Sealing. Chapter 4, Team 7. It was early morning, the sun hadn't even risen yet. But one Uzumaki Naruto was already up and about, getting ready for his first day as a ninja. After a quick rinse in the shower, and a somewhat decent breakfast of eggs and toast, Naruto was ready to start the day. He looked himself over in the mirror, checking his clothing and equipment to make sure everything looked good. He wanted every one of his classmates, former classmates he reminded himself, to leave with a good impression of him. He looked at his bow staff attached to his back, angling over his shoulder slightly for easy access. Nodding to himself, the blonde genin left and began making his way towards the academy. He had decided to walk to the academy instead of roof hopping, even though he had come to enjoy the activity. There were not any people out at this time, being so early that the sun was just beginning to rise, so Naruto did not have to suffer through any glares this morning, and since it was so early he could afford to take his time. However, as Naruto turned around a corner he stopped when he noticed a small section of the fence that was dirtier than the others. And sideways. And had a pair of feet sticking out of the bottom, a pair of hands on either side and a tuft of hair sticking out at the top. Naruto sighed and shook his head. Seriously, you think he would have learned yesterday? Naruto thought as he started walking forward again. Just as he passed the sheet, Naruto pulled out 4 kunai, tossing each one into a corner of the sheet, pinning his rival to the fence. Gak. Hey, what the, let me go. Get me out of here, came the muffled response from inside of the cloth. Naruto grinned as he walked up and rapped his knuckles against Konohamaru's helmeted head, making the currently complaining kid quiet down. So can I help you, Konohamaru? He asked, amusement leaking from his voice. Ha, you saw through my disguise again. That's why I respect you as my rival. Konohamaru tried to get out of the restraining cloth by slipping through the sides, but the kunai had stretched the sheet enough so that they were too tight to slip through and in too deep to pull out from his position. Now can you let me out? Naruto grinned as he grabbed the kunai and pulled them out, letting the covering drop to the ground. So, I take it there's something you want from me? The blonde asked. I challenge you, Konohamaru shouted as he pointed at Naruto. Naruto laughed at the kid. Sorry, but I can't. Remember, I have to head over to the academy today to get assigned my Jonin-sensei. Oh yeah, Konohamaru said, his eyes getting stars in them. Man, that's so cool. I wish I was a ninja. Well, just make sure you work hard and don't slack off. Naruto looked up at the sky and saw the sun had risen. He would have to hurry now if he wanted to get to the academy before the glares started coming his way. Anyways, I need to head over to the academy or I'll be late. See ya. Naruto tossed the energetic kid a wave as he ran off. Naruto ended up getting to the academy a tad later than he had expected due to the interruption. However, it was still early enough that he doubted anyone else was there. Making his way to his homeroom, Naruto walked up to the door, opening just as Iruka was about to walk out. Iruka blinked in surprise when he laid eyes on Naruto and for a moment, didn't recognize him. Oh, morning Iruka-sensei. Naruto greeted his teacher with a large grin. Iruka blinked once, twice, thrice. Naruto? He asked, getting a nod in response. The scarred Chunin Academy teacher looked his former student up and down, taking notice of the rather large cloak covering the blonde's frame. You look different. Iruka smirked a bit. You actually look like a real shinobi now. Hey, Naruto said indignantly. Are you saying I didn't look like a? He stopped, took a deep breath and started again. I mean thanks Iruka-sensei, hee. The Chunin instructor raised an eyebrow at the small turnaround in emotion, but just chalked it up to Naruto being Naruto. You're here a lot earlier than I expected. Yeah, well, Naruto trailed off for a moment as he tried to come up with an excuse for being so early. It would not do if he said he felt like walking and did not want to be subject to the villagers' glares on the day he became a ninja. I guess I was just too excited to wait. I've been waiting a whole week, you know. Iruka chuckled. And waiting was never one of your strong points. Naruto's left eye twitched, but he quickly calmed himself down. He was a ninja, and he refused to let himself get so worked up over something as trivial as this. Instead he plastered a large grin on his face. Yeah, I guess I did. But I've gotten a lot more patient now. Really? That's good. I look forward to seeing this patience you're talking about. Iruka resisted the urge to chuckle when Naruto's left eyebrow began twitching. Anyways, why don't you go have a seat? I have some things I need to get, so I'll be back a little later. Right, see ya sensei, Naruto said as he walked inside. Looking around, Naruto decided to choose a seat in the back right corner, where he could remain inconspicuous. Not that he did not want to be seen by his peers or anything. But he had read in a book called Ninja Basics for Dummies that a ninja should always remain aware of his surroundings in order to gather information. Naruto figured that he could practice this by using the better view that seat offered, so he could find out more about his potential teammates from there. Taking off his staff, Naruto leaned it against the wall, before taking out a book and sitting down. He flipped the book, which was called Intermediate Level Fuinjutsu, Level 1, a book written by a man called Jiraiya, and began to read while he waited for the orientation to start. Slowly but surely people trickled in, giving him a curious glance, but because his head was buried in his book, no one really knew it was him and just wrote him off. Naruto flipped another page in his book as he continued reading, this chapter being about seals that affected the body, namely training seals. The gravity and resistance seals sound pretty useful. I bet they would work better than my weight bands, since they affect the body as a whole, rather than just one specific spot. Naruto frowned as he read one particular note about the gravity seals. It seems they affect height if used at a young age, so I guess that's out. Still, the resistance seals sound useful. While the weights will increase my strength, the resistance seals are specifically designed to help boost speed. He sighed, however, when he noticed that there was no example of a resistance or gravity seals, and that this chapter was only talking about what seals can do to affect the body. Naruto continued reading as more and more students came into the class, ignoring most of the conversation around him as he read. However, he paused when he felt and heard an odd rumbling sound that increased in volume as time went on. It sounded almost like a stampede. He turned his head just in time to see two familiar girls burst through the door. Yamanaka Ino, a girl with long blonde hair done up in a ponytail and bangs on the right side of her face. She had a purple sleeveless shirt, purple arm warmers, and a purple skirt with cuts on the side and bandages covering her legs from mid-thigh, which moved down into a pair of blue shinobi sandals. Ino was a member of the famed Yamanaka clan, which was made famous during the Third Great Shinobi War due to Ino's father Inoichi, who had been a member of the Ino Shikacho trio. A team that had used phenomenal teamwork to defeat enemies and opponents far tougher than they were, making them one of the more feared people during the war. The Yamanaka clan was also well known for their jutsu that allowed them to invade the minds of their opponents, making them wonderful interrogation experts. Despite the fact that Ino came a powerful clan, she was just like all of the other girls in class. More concerned with being her hair and dieting to be twig-like thin in order to impress the resident emo Sasuke. The second girl to appear within the doorway was Haruno Sakura. Both held up their hands as soon as they entered the room. I win. They both yelled at the same time, causing a few people, Naruto included, to sweat drop. Ha! Beat that forehead girl. My foot was in the door first. Ino shouted with a smirk. What are you talking about, Ino pig? Sakura asked with a sneer. My foot was at least 1/4 of an inch in the door before yours. Were they always this loud? Naruto wondered to himself. He watched as the two walked up to Sasuke, who had taken his usual spot at the front of the room in the right side next to the window. Sasuke-kun, would you like to sit by me today? Sakura asked as she walked up to Sasuke with a smile that she hoped was cute. Naruto sighed as Sasuke ignored the girl like she did not even exist. I wish she would look at me like that. He shook his head. He had not actually thought about the girl who he had a crush on this past week. What, with all the time he had been spending with Anko? Anko's more attractive anyways, so is Tenten. Naruto blinked for a moment as he set his book down. Where had that come from? He shook his head and was just about to start reading when Ino decided to make her displeasure of letting Sakura sit next to Sasuke known. You can't sit next to Sasuke-kun, because I'm going to sit next to Sasuke-kun. Ino screamed, before turning to said raven-haired boy. Right, Sasuke-kun. Once again the Uchiha ignored her. Ha! Sasuke-kun doesn't want to sit next to you, Ino pig. Sakura yelled. I'm the only one he wants to sit next to. Naruto sighed as he put the book down, finding it impossible to concentrate with all the noise they were making. He had never really paid much attention to it before, but for whatever reason the amount of noise they were generating was starting to bother him. Of course he had also never tried to read before, so maybe it was just that they were distracting him from his book. Standing up, the blonde made his way over to the two bickering girls. Excuse me, he said, getting their attention, as well as that of the rest of the class who, after noticing his whisker marks, stared at him in shock. But you do both realize that there are two available seats next to him. Naruto pointed at the seat on Sasuke's right, away from the aisle. So neither of you has to actually fight for a seat. Naruto looked at everyone as they stared at him, surprise and recognition in their eyes. He would have smirked but held the urge in. It would not be cool if he gave them the impression that he enjoyed seeing the surprise on their faces. Naruto? Sakura asked as she noticed his whisker marks. It quickly changed to a sneer of disgust as she decided to berate him. What are you doing here? In case you didn't notice, this is only for people who graduated, graduate ed, not for failures like you. As the class laughed at Sakura's words, Naruto frowned. He had expected this, to be honest, but had kind of been hoping that with his new look it would change her opinion of him. Guess not. He sighed lightly, before deciding that he didn't want to put up with her abusive words right now, especially since for whatever reason they hurt more. If you had used those two eyes stuck in your orbital sockets to look up, you would see that I have a headband. Naruto pointed to his head where Iruka's headband sat. So I have graduated, thank you very much, perhaps you're not as smart as I thought. Naruto walked off and moved back up to his seat, leaving a stunned crowd behind. Did he really just insult me? Asked Sakura as she tried to comprehend what had just happened. That had never happened before. Naruto would always ask her out, and she would always hit him because it made her feel better about herself. Sakura felt an odd sense of emptiness as she wondered if Naruto had decided that he didn't like her. He's just trying to make you feel bad, Shanaru. Sakura's inner persona shouted, getting Sakura to snap out of her shock. You're right. I bet Naruto Baka's trying to make me feel bad for him, so I ask him out on a date. Well, it's not going to work. Sakura sat on Sasuke's right as her and Ino once again began to fight over said Uchiha. As the rest of the class got back to what they were doing, one girl kept her eyes on Naruto. I had thought that Naruto-kun had failed. Hinata looked at Naruto, who had gone back to his reading with a blush. I'm glad he didn't. In the special spying room located within the Hokage Tower, Sarutobi and 9 Jonin were gathered around the crystal orb. These Jonin were the ones who had been assigned as the Jonin senseis for the newly graduated genin. Though only 3 would end up getting that position. Well, that was slightly unexpected. One of the Jonin in the room said, a man with spiky silver hair, wearing the standard Jonin attire named Hitaki Kakashi. He looked into the spy orb with a lazy expression, though if one looked close enough they could see him analyzing everything. And that one must be Uchiha Sasuke, the most promising student and rookie of the year. Yes, the one with the dark hair and blue shirt is Uchiha Sasuke. Sarutobi replied evenly. Truthfully, he did not think Sasuke was deserving of his title, especially when the teachers in class handed the boy everything, but he would not deny the boy was at least mildly talented. He's the sole survivor of the Uchiha clan. Spoke up a Jonin with curly black hair and exotic red eyes. She was a new Jonin, but had quickly risen as the most prominent genjutsu expert. Her name was Yuahi Kurenai. At least the only Uchiha still left in the village. Sarutobi countered, making the red-eyed woman wince. The crystal ball changed view to close in on some of the genin, one such view showing Naruto, who had gone back to his seat and picked up his book. Uzumaki Naruto, Kakashi muttered to himself. Naruto frowned as he continued to read his book, doing his best to ignore the new stares he was getting. Why did I do that? Naruto wondered as he thought about what he had said to Sakura. He had never actually insulted anyone before, and Sakura was the last person he would have expected to insult. Yet something about what she had said then had rubbed him the wrong way. Her words had hurt, of course, even more than it normally did. But he couldn't just chalk it up to that. Maybe it has something to do with learning about the Kyuubi, he considered that thought. After learning about Kyuubi being sealed inside of him, the villagers' hatred made sense. However, that still couldn't quite explain why he had been rude to Sakura. After all, from what Gigi said, only the adults knew of his status as a Jinchuriki. Like most of the kids in his class, Sakura often berated him. In fact, out of all the people in the class, she was the one who treated him the worst. But it had not always been like that. The first time he had met her, she had been getting picked on by some bullies due to her large forehead, and Naruto had seen it and chased them off. After that, she had spent the day with him. It had been his first and only time he had gotten to spend with someone his own age, and the first time he had really had any fun in his childhood. Sakura had even promised to be his best friend during their time together. However, when her mom had seen them together, she took Sakura away and told her to never go near the blonde again. Sakura had followed her mother's advice, and Naruto had not seen her after that until he entered the academy. When he did see her again, the blonde had been ecstatic at seeing his first friend. However, she had either not remembered him, or had become heavily influenced by her mom, because the first thing she had done when he had tried to say hi was to hit him and tell him to leave her alone. That had of course not stopped him from trying to get his friend back. He had tried again and again to no effect. Eventually, despite the amount of abuse he had taken, Naruto had become so desperate to get his first friend back that he developed a crush on her. After that, he had begun asking her out on dates, not really understanding what the difference between a date and a get-together with friends were, since he had never had the talk, because he was an orphan. This only seemed to further aggravate Sakura, who had started developing a crush on Sasuke. This in turn caused her reactions to become more and more violent. Now she was easily the most abusive person in class, at least to him. No one really liked him, and everyone made fun of him, but she was the only one who had ever actually hit him. Naruto shook his head. Thinking about things too much made his head hurt, so he decided to just let whatever he was feeling run its course. A few minutes later, Iruka came into the room and noticed that it was oddly quiet, only a few people huddled about whispering to each other. That's odd. I would have expected everyone to be jumping around and yelling their heads off at finally graduating. Deciding not to think about, Iruka coughed to get the attention of the newly graduated class on him as he began his speech. As of today, you are no longer academy students, but full-fledged ninja. But in the ranks of ninja, you all are only genin, the lowest ranking in the ninja hierarchy. However, the first step has now been made and your greatest challenges are now ahead of you. Iruka paused and pulled out a clipboard. For the next stage, you 27 genin will be assigned into 3-man squads, with each squad being assigned a Jonin sensei, who will supervise and continue to train you from here on out. Several students looked up with surprise etched on their faces, as they heard they were being assigned into groups. Naruto looked up when he heard that, but only spared the thought a moment before he went back to his reading. He had already known he would be assigned a team when he had recently read a book on shinobi basics. Sakura and Ino were busy ribbing each other and making comments about who would get to be with their Sasuke-kun. Much to said Bruder's annoyance, since he was in between the pair and had to listen to them. Sasuke narrowed his eyes as he heard Iruka's words and tried to ignore the two useless fangirls bickering. A squad of 3 will only slow me down. Iruka coughed into his hand before he continued. Now then, the squads have been arranged to give each team a balance of abilities and skills. I will now read the roster, so pay attention to when your name is called, and who you will be teamed up with. Iruka looked at his clipboard and began to call out names. Team 1 will be. Naruto stopped reading and began paying attention as the genin squads were called, not wanting to miss who his teammates were. I kind of wish I had some friends that I could be in a squad with. Shikamaru and Choji are okay, but we're not really friends. Kiba, I suppose, could be considered a pranking rival, but now that I'm trying to be a serious ninja, he shook his head of his thoughts and just concentrated on paying attention. Team 7 will be Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke. Iruka was forced to stop and wince as Sakura let loose an ear-splitting victory screech, and Uzumaki Naruto. What? Came the voices of both Naruto and Sakura. Uruka-sensei, how could you even think of putting me in the same team as him? Naruto shouted as he pointed at Sasuke. Acting like mature ninja be damned. This had to be corrected now. We don't get along, we can't work together, we aren't friends. Now I'll concede to you the Tem isn't friends with anyone. He seems to enjoy spending more time sticking the 20-foot-long metal pole further up Hi's sand practicing his brooding pose. But out of all the people in this class, we get along the least. The guys in the class laughed when they heard Naruto's words, well, everyone except for Sasuke, who scowled intently at the blonde. Meanwhile, the girls were fuming at the insult to their Sasuke-kun. They began leaking a pathetic amount of killing intent at Naruto, who ignored it, having gotten far worse from Anko. Naruto, Uruka said with a sigh. As I said, these squads are assigned to balance out. Sasuke got the best scores in class, you got the worst. Naruto's head slumped down a bit as the class now snickered at him. The Hokage assigned these squads, and they are not negotiable. I'm sorry, but you'll just have to deal with it. Now Team 8 will be Hyuga Hinata, Aburame Shino and Inazuka Kiba. Team 9 is still in circulation, so Team 10 will be Yamanaka Ino, Nara Shikamaru and Akamachi Choji. Naruto sighed as he slumped into his chair. Despite his slight outburst at her earlier, he still wouldn't mind being with Sakura. However, Sasuke was a different story. Throughout his entire time at the academy, he had considered Sasuke his rival, always trying to outdo the raven-haired ninja, who in turn always ignored the blonde like he was not even worth his time. The last thing Naruto wanted to do was be on the same time as him. Now then, you'll all meet your Jonin senseis after lunch. Until then, class dismissed. Uruka said, gathering his stuff and leaving. The assembled genin all got up and hurried out of the room. Sasuke-kun, Sakura called out as she walked out of the academy and looked around for the elusive raven-haired genin. Now where did he go? And I was hoping since we were the same team now he would have lunch with me. Hey Sakura-chan, Naruto said, making the pink-haired girl go rigid, even more so than usual because of his insult in class today. What do you want? Sakura hissed with venom in her voice as Naruto came up to her. Naruto winced a bit but pressed on. Well, I wanted to apologize for getting angry at you, I didn't mean it. Sakura stopped glaring as she looked at him with shock and curiosity. I wasn't really myself at the time, so I'm sorry. I can't believe Naruto is actually apologizing. Sakura thought in shock. Naruto never apologized to anyone, even when the teachers tried to force him to for playing a prank. Heedless to the Pinket's thoughts, Naruto continued on. I also wanted to know if you wanted to go have lunch with me so we could get to know each other better, we could even see if Sasuke wants to. However, he didn't get any farther than that as Sakura hit him on the head. I should have known that's what you wanted. I bet that was your plan the whole time. Insulting me and then apologizing afterwards to make me think you were a good person so you could ask me on a date. It's not going to happen. Naruto winced a bit as he rubbed the new lump he had gotten on his head. Standing back up, he tried to defend himself. That's not what's going on. I just wanted to get to know my teammates better. Shut up, Baka. Sakura screeched as she smashed a fist into Naruto's face, sending the young blonde flying. God, why do you keep asking me for dates? I'm never going to go out with you. You're annoying. Naruto watched as Sakura walked off with a huff. She didn't even try to hear me out. A few odd tears stung the corner of his eyes, but he banished them before they could fall. Getting back up, Naruto made his way over to the tire swing that he had been on after he had failed. He didn't really understand it. Was he so undesirable that Sakura would not even listen to him? Or had I pestered her for so many dates that she just assumed I was going to ask her for another one? He asked himself with a sigh. The answer to that question probably no longer mattered anyways. Reaching into his left kunai pouch, Naruto pulled out a containment seal. Unrolling it, he unsealed the contents, revealing it to be some rabbit that he had caught a few days ago, cooked and sealed. Grabbing the chopsticks he sealed with his food, he began to eat. Whatcha doing, Gaki? Ga! Naruto shouted as he threw his food up in the air and jumped off the swing. Spinning around in midair, Naruto landed on his feet and came face to face with a grinning Anko. Sweat Kami, you scared the shit out of me. Naruto yelled as he clutched his rapidly beating heart. Don't do that. Anko snickered, sorry, I just couldn't help myself. You're just too easy. Naruto scowled. You know I'm going to get you back for startling me like that, right? I'm not called the prankster king from hell for nothing, you know. Huh. I'd like to see you try and get me, kid. Enko spoke with a smirk. We both know you're 100 years too soon to get me. Naruto sighed as he calmed down. Truthfully, he was glad for the distraction Enko would provide, and it did feel nice to know she had come here even though she had most likely just gotten back from a mission. So how was your mission? He asked, sitting back down on the swing and unsealing another scroll of cooked rabbit. Meh, it was a mission. I went in, assassinated some douche who messed with the wrong people and came back. Enko said, grinning at the glare Naruto gave her. ANNDD. Naruto asked, wanting more details. And that's it. Enko shrugged. Naruto just sighed. Enko rarely ever talked about the things she did. He had asked her about her normal job at the INT department and all she had said was, "Oh, it's amazing listening to the screams of your victims as they cry for the mommies," not really a descriptive explanation. So what are you doing here? Asked Naruto after swallowing a mouthful of food. What, can't I visit my favorite Gaki? Enko asked with an innocent expression on her face. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Gaki, you know. Naruto deadpanned. Enko grinned. Well, if I knew more you would still be my favorite. I'm sure. Naruto said as he rolled his eyes. So, who did you get stuck with for your Genin squad? Enko asked. Naruto looked up from his meal as he swallowed a bite of rabbit. Well, I'm on Team 7 with Haruno Sakura and Uchiha Sasuke. Enko shuddered. Man, do I feel bad for you, getting on a team with that brooder. I've seen that kid walk around Konoha before. He's got a bigger stick in his than his old man did when he was alive. Naruto grinned. I'm glad to see that someone understands my plight. Yeah, I feel for ya, kid. I'd probably end up killing the Tem if he's as spoiled as I think he is. Enko chuckled. So what about this other teammate, that Sakura girl? Naruto frowned as he thought about her. She's a girl in my class, she has pink hair and was listed as second best in academics. To be honest, she didn't do well in the physical portion and has small reserves, but from what I've read she would be the genjutsu and medical ninja support, so I suppose that wouldn't matter. Enko noticed the boy's frown and slight monotone voice. Ah, come on, there's more to it than that, right? Well, Naruto sighed. I kinda have a crush on her. Ooh, so the little Gaki is growing up? Enko asked with a grin. I've had a crush on her since I was 8, Enko. Naruto said in a deadpan voice before sighing. However, she never seems to like me, no matter what I do. She's too stuck up on the Uchiha Tem. Naruto scowled a bit at the thought. I had really thought that my new looks would change her opinion of me. Enko looked at the kid's growing depressed expression. You can't change people's opinion of you within a day, Gaki. Enko said with a blunt tone. If it were that easy then everyone would love you by now. I was able to get you to like me, wasn't I? Naruto said with a smirk. Enko blinked a bit, before blushing. She would not admit it to anyone, but she had grown fond of the blonde soon-to-be ninja in a short amount of time. That's different, I'm not like the rest of those stupid villagers. Naruto saw Enko's hand go to her neck and frowned at the almost instinctive move. I guess that's true, Naruto said, shaking his head as he smiled at her. That's right, I'm not to be lumped in with those bakas. Enko said, pumping her fists in the air. Now don't worry about that girl anymore, if she doesn't like you just say screw her and move on. There are plenty of other fish in the sea, or, however that saying goes. I wonder why they say fish anyways. Yeah, I suppose I should. Naruto said, turning to a trash can as he threw away his empty plate and chopsticks. Besides, I am a shinobi now, romance should probably wait until after I get more powerful and accomplish my goal of becoming a powerful ninja. That's the spirit. Forget all about that pink-haired chick. Enko said as she came up behind him. She grinned as she felt Naruto shiver when she wrapped her arms around him and pulled the blonde against her feminine assets. Besides, I'm way better than some premature little girl. WWH, what are you doing? Naruto stuttered, his voice cracking as he squeaked. Not that he was actually surprised by her actions, mind you, she had started doing this a while ago after an incident where he had surprised her during sparring, only to trip and land smack dab in between her bosom. Rather than kill him, she had grinned and asked if he liked it. Of course Naruto being Naruto had not been able to speak and stuttered out incoherent gibberish, which of course caused Anko to get amused. Since then she had taken to either sneaking up on him and doing this, or grabbing him and setting her in his lap when they were eating dango, claiming she could not get comfortable without her fox plushie. "What's wrong? Don't you like this?" Anko whispered in his ear, an unseen grin on her face. Really, this kid was too easy. She had always enjoyed using her feminine wiles to toy with men and then put them down. With Naruto it was even more fun since he obviously had no clue what to do in this kind of situation. That's the problem, Naruto thought, because he did like it. The way her chest pressed and rubbed against his back made him feel things he had never felt before, even when he was thinking about Sakura. It was also due to the oddly warm feeling he got. He had never been hugged before by a member of the opposite, or even having women get close to him, with the exception of Sakura, who got close enough to hit him. So having someone who was actually willing to be this close and physical with him was, well, it felt nice to say the least. That is to say, Naruto tried to get out something, but like the last time she had done this, all that came out was gibberish. Ha 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 ha. Anko started laughing as she let Naruto go. "Gaki, you are far too easy to fluster. You better hope some enemy kunoichi from another village doesn't try to seduce you or you'd be in deep shit." Naruto scowled as he watched Anko clutching her stomach and trying to get her breath back. However, he could not give her any retort, finding it impossible to come up with anything suitable to say due to his scattered brain. Anko's laughing calmed down to an occasional snicker. "So who's your Jonin sensei?" she asked at last. Naruto fought down his blush and re-established a mental link with his mind as Anko brought about an abrupt change of topic. However, he shrugged. Her ability to randomly switch subjects easily enough, he had gotten used to it over the past week. I think his name was Kakashi." "Hitaki Kakashi?" Anko asked before snorting. "I suppose I shouldn't be surprised, he had always had a soft spot for that spoiled Uchiha brat, given his own past relations with that clan." So you know about my sensei?" Naruto tilted his head in curiosity. "Know about him?" Anko scoffed. "Gaki, everyone knows who your sensei is. He is one of the best ninja in the village, known as Sharingan no Kakashi or the copycat ninja. Only a few of our Jonin can rival him in power." Naruto looked at Anko before a grin formed on his face. "So what else can you tell me about my sensei? Where the hell is our sensei?" Naruto sighed to himself as he flipped another page of his book, trying to ignore Sakura's rather loud exclamations. Not that he could quite blame her. He was infinitely less patient than she was. If it wasn't for his book he would probably go mad. "Calm down, Sakura," Naruto said, deciding to not add the affectionate chan suffix at the end, something that neither of his teammates seemed to notice. Kakashi is always 3 hours late to anything barring an A rank or higher mission, or a direct order from the Hokage. Both of his teammates turned to him. "How do you know that, Dobi?" asked Sasuke, for once curious about what the blonde idiot had to say. Naruto smiled lightly as he remembered his enlightening conversation with Anko just a few minutes before. "A little birdie told me," he replied, flipping another page of his book. He and Anko had agreed not to let anyone know she had given him the information on their sensei, agreeing that it would be much more fun to let them suffer and stew in their ignorance. Both Sasuke and Sakura waited to see if he would elaborate. When Naruto didn't, Sasuke scoffed and turned away, while Sakura went back to what she had been doing, switching between pacing and staring dreamily at Sasuke. Several minutes later, exactly 3 hours after all the other genin had left, a man with silver hair entered the room and looked at them. "Team 7, he asked in a bored tone. Naruto almost snickered as he saw the man's lazy half-dropped eye and slumped posture. It seemed that Anko's assessment of the man was right on the dot. "That's right, who's asking, Cyclops?" Kakashi ignored the blonde's statement as he continued studying the group. How should I put this, my first impression of this group." He paused for a moment to build up suspense. "You're all boring and I think I hate you." Sakura's face faltered, while Sasuke's left eyebrow gained a twitch. Naruto just looked at the man and snickered. "Meet me on the roof." Kakashi disappeared in a puff of smoke. Was that a Sunshin? Naruto asked himself, having seen Anko perform a technique similar, except it used leaves instead of smoke. I'll have to see if she can teach me that later. Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura walked up the stairs and onto the roof, seeing their Jonin-sensei sitting on the rail. The three sat on the steps below him with Sakura in the middle, Sasuke on the left and Naruto on the right. Alright, since we're all here, why don't you all introduce yourselves? Kakashi suggested in a voice that said he really did not care who they were. Introduce ourselves, Sakura asked in a quizzical tone. What are we supposed to say? Naruto blinked as he looked over at Sakura. Did she really just ask that? He shook his head and for a moment, he tried to recall why he liked her in the first place. Oh, you know the usual. Likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future, stuff like that. Kakashi said in a dismissive tone. Well, since we already know a little bit about each other and nothing about you, how about you go first? Suggested Naruto. Kakashi looked over at the blonde before shrugging. Sure, I don't see why not. Let's see, my name is Hitaki Kakashi, my likes, I don't feel like telling you that, dislikes, are none of your business. Dreams for the future, well, I have lots of hobbies. Dear Kami-sama, Anko really was on the book with this guy. Naruto thought before grinning as an interesting idea took hold. This would be fun. Your name is Hitaki Kakashi, your likes are reading your porn, called Ika Ika Paradise. Dislikes are anything or anyone that tries to take you away from your porn. Hobbies are reading your porn in broad daylight and public places. And your dreams for the future are to star in one of the Ika Ika books and an Ika Ika movie if one ever comes out. Naruto said with a smirk as he watched the other three. Sasuke looked over at him before going back to brooding, however, he seemed to have developed a nasty eye twitch. Sakura was looking red as she stared between Naruto and her sensei, though, whether from anger at him, their sensei, or embarrassment because of the information just given, Naruto didn't know. And Kakashi was looking at him with narrowed eyes. How do you know all of that? Kakashi asked in a serious tone. Naruto just smiled. A little birdie told me. Everyone stared at him with a mixture of confusion and incredulity. None of that stuff is common knowledge. Kakashi thought to himself before blinking. Well, some of that stuff is common knowledge. He corrected, after all, he did often walk down public access ways reading his precious Ika Ika. However, some of that other stuff is only be known by a handful of people. That means Naruto knows one of my associates and somehow convinced them to part with that information. But who? And how did he convince them? The Jonin shook his head, and decided he would figure this out later. Well, since you were kind enough to talk about me, why don't you go first, Goldilocks? Naruto raised an eyebrow at the man as if to say, is that the best you can do? Well, alright then. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen, training, and a little birdie. Naruto smiled as he saw Kakashi's visible eye twitch. He was really going to have to thank Anko for telling him about this guy. I dislike arrogant fools who can't tell the difference between a kunai and the scroll it's sealed into. Naruto scowled. The other two genin just looked at him oddly, but Kakashi's brow furrowed. I had been told that he knew of his tenant. It seems he's taken a disliking of people who can't see past their hatred. Kakashi resisted a sigh. I hope this doesn't become a problem. As well as the 3 minutes it takes to cook ramen. My hobbies include training and, well, that's it for now, I guess. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. And my dream is, he thought about it for a moment. He still wanted to become Hokage, but there was also something else he wanted even more. It was the original reason he had wanted to become Hokage. I have 2 dreams for the future. The first is to earn recognition and respect from the people of this village by becoming the most powerful shinobi in the world. The second is to become the greatest Hokage the world has ever known. While his 2 teammates scoffed at him, Kakashi analyzed the boy in surprise. Interesting, he doesn't seem anything like what the reports say he is. I was expecting him to be loud and obnoxious, screaming at the top of his lungs about wanting to be Hokage. Hell, I was expecting some kind of prank when I came here. The boy was definitely becoming something of a surprise, which was not quite what Kakashi wanted, having learned to dislike surprises. Either the academy teachers had a biased opinion of him and put it in their report, quite possible given that most people have an irrational hatred of him. Or the incident with Mizuki affected him more than we thought. Kakashi put his thoughts on the back burner for now as he pointed to Sakura. Alright you, Pinky, you're next. Sakura scowled at being called Pinky but answered anyways. My name Haruno Sakura. What I mean the person I like is, she looked over at Sasuke and blushed. My hobbies are, she looked over at Sasuke, blushed and giggled. In my dream for the future, she looked over at Sasuke, blushed, squealed and got a slight nosebleed. Kakashi and Naruto both sweat dropped, Sasuke was too busy brooding to sweat drop. This is great, I've got a perverted fangirl. Kakashi sighed to himself. Is there anything you don't like? He asked. Naruto baka. Sakura screeched. Naruto winced at the volume of her voice before sighing as he realized that kind of answer was to be expected. What else is new? He mumbled under his breath. Alright then, Kakashi picked out his ear with his pinky finger. You, the broody one, you're next. Sasuke scowled but otherwise did not rise to his sensei's remarks. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I don't particularly like anything, and I dislike too many things to name. What I have is not a dream, because I will make it a reality. I'm going to restore my clan, and kill a certain someone. As Sasuke finished his speech, the people around him had varying reaction. Oh man, Sasuke-kun is so cool. Sakura squealed in delight. Cha, he's so hot. Inner Sakura let her opinion be known. So he wants to kill someone, Naruto thought to himself. I wonder if it has something to do with the person who killed his clan. It's just as I thought. Kakashi sighed, he had figured that this was how Sasuke would be. I can only hope he'll eventually turn away from this path. Good, he said out loud, keeping his lazy expression and not letting a hint of his thoughts betray him. You've all got your own opinions and you're all unique. He nodded to himself. Now tomorrow we will have our first mission as a team. What kind of mission? Asked Naruto, eager to finally prove he could be a great ninja. Are we going to be fighting some missing ninja? Or maybe we'll have to protect a princess. Come on sensei, don't leave us hanging. Calm down Naruto. Kakashi spoke in a lazy voice. When the blonde finally stilled he spoke again. Our task will involve just the four of us. A survival exercise. Kakashi looked over at the different reactions, most of it was surprise. However, Naruto had narrowed his eyes as he looked at Kakashi with a thoughtful frown. Now that surprised Kakashi. A survival exercise? Sakura questioned. But we already took those back in the academy. This isn't going to be some simple exercise. This is nothing like your training at the academy. Kakashi stated with a smirk, not that his soon-to-be students could see it. Or not, it all depends on if they pass the test. Naruto's frown deepened, there was something going on here. Then what kind of training is it? Kakashi began to chuckle, causing the three students to give him odd looks ranging from confusion to consternation. Hey, that was a normal question sensei, what's so funny? Asked Sakura. Well, if I told you, you'd chicken out. Kakashi said laughing some more. Naruto glared at the man fiercely. Just try us. Oh don't worry Naruto I will. Kakashi laughed, before shifting his personality to be more serious. Of the 27 graduates that made it this far, only 9 will actually be accepted as genin. The other 18 will be weeded out and sent back to the academy. In other words, this is a make it or break it pass-fail test, with the chances of passing being at least 66%. Sakura's eyes widened in shock as she began to worry about what her sensei was saying, wondering whether or not she would be able to pass and still remain with her Sasuke-kun. Said Uchiha on the other hand looked irate at having to do another test, especially with 2 other people who would only slow him down. Naruto however was in thought, I've never heard of this test before. Maybe I can ask Anko to shed some light on this new development. But we already graduated. Sakura shouted. That's not fair. Then what was that test we took at the academy all about? Oh that. Kakashi shrugged dismissively. That was simply to weed out the hopeless cases. The ones that pass that test are the ones who have the potential to become genin. I'm the one who gets to decide whether you 3 pass or fail. Be at training ground 7 at 5 a.m. Bring all your gear and weapons. Kakashi paused for a moment before giving them the clincher. And I would suggest not eating breakfast tomorrow morning. Why is that? Asked Sakura. Because you'll just throw it up. Kakashi disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving a pale Sakura, a brooding Sasuke, and a contemplative Naruto. Another test. And if I fail I'm going to be separated from Sasuke-kun. Sakura thought to herself. This is a test of love. Another test won't make any difference for me. It'll be easy. Sasuke thought as he looked over at his two teammates. So long as these two don't get in my way. Another test, this one to see if we can actually become genin. Naruto frowned in thought. He said not to eat, but I read that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, especially if we want to have enough energy to fight. He also said to be there at 5 o'clock. Is all of that a trick? Part of the test. Perhaps he'll expect us to come late because he was tardy today and then he'll come on time tomorrow. Naruto shook his head. He was starting to think too much and it was giving him a headache again. The eating part is easy enough to ignore, but I'll have to talk to Anko about whether or not she thinks Kakashi would be late. I'm out of here, Sasuke muttered as he stood up. Oh, Sasuke-kun, maybe we can spend some time together, to make a plan to pass Kakashi's test. Sakura said in a hopeful voice. Sasuke turned around and stared at her for a full minute. I don't need a plan to pass this test. All you'll do is hold me back. I don't need worthless teammates like you and the Dobi to get in my way. Sasuke walked off leaving a dejected Sakura. Naruto grit his teeth a bit. Who the hell does he think he is? Always belittling people. He looked over at Sakura, a part of him still held onto his small crush and wanted to help her. But another part, the part that had been slowly coming out since the Mizuki incident, wanted her stew in her own misery for a change. In the end he sighed, giving her a small pat on the shoulder as he walked past her. I'm sure he didn't mean what he said, he told her. Naruto? Sakura asked in surprise. But Naruto didn't pay any attention as he jumped off the roof and made his way towards his special training ground. Naruto continued tree hopping as he looked around the forest of death. He stopped at the next tree branch and sighed. I wonder where she is. He asked himself. He had been looking for over an hour and had yet to find a trace of her. Just then Naruto's senses went on high alert and he rolled to left as a kunai lodged itself where he had been. Naruto pulled out a kunai as he came to his feet and looked around. Several more kunai came out of the trees to his left, and Naruto used his kunai to block them, before tossing his kunai into the tree. The kunai came back a few seconds later, but Naruto was already running towards that spot. He pulled out several shuriken and tossed them at the figure hidden in the brush. Going through a few hand seals he called out a jutsu. Shuriken Kage Bushin no Jutsu. 5 shuriken became 25 shuriken, and they all impaled the figure below. Naruto landed on the branch and narrowed his eyes as he saw a pile of mud. He jumped into the air when several snakes shot out of the tree bark. Rebounding off the surface of the tree he pushed chakra into his legs to land on the next branch up. He spun around as he heard a whooshing sound and blocked a kunai that came his way. He looked at the person attached to the kunai and smiled. Do you have to greet me this way every time I come here? He asked. Anko smirked. Of course I do. I've got to make sure to keep you on your toes, otherwise you'll just die out in the field as some nameless loser. Ah, I knew you cared for me. Naruto said with a grin. Don't look too into Gaki. Anko replied with a similar look. I'm just protecting my reputation. After all, what would people think if you died and they found out I trained you? Who knows, Naruto said with a shrug. Though, they would probably think you did it on purpose and praise you for finally killing the demon. Now there's an idea, Anko said, pushing him back a bit. Maybe. Naruto grinned. However, I'm not that easy to kill. Oh, Anko raised an eyebrow. I'm pretty sure I could kill you right now if I wanted to. You'd think that, wouldn't you? Naruto asked with a smirk, mouthing a word that made Anko's eyes widen. Boom, boom. A loud explosion destroyed the top of the trunk the two were on. Naruto came out from hiding behind a bush on the ground level. Did I get her? He wondered out loud. His question was answered when a pair of snakes wrapped around his torso and held them. Not quite. A voice sounded in his ear. The snakes turned him around to see Anko grinning at him. Not bad Gaki, but you should never let your guard down after a move like that. Always assume your opponent escaped, and plan your next move. Ah, Naruto grunted as Anko's snakes squeezed him hard enough that he felt his ribs creak. At least she did not make her snakes bite him like the last time he had made a mistake when they sparred. I'll try to remember that. Good boy, Anko said as she put him down. So how was your meeting with Kakashi? Not bad. Naruto said, rubbing his now sore ribs. He smirked. You were right about him. You should have seen the look on everyone's face, especially his face, when I mentioned his porn addiction. Enko gave a sadistic grin. I know, it's a little depressing that I can't rub it into his face without him finding out that I was the one who told you all of this. Still, we might be able to have more fun with him this way. Naruto commented, thinking of all the fun he could have messing with his sensei's head using the knowledge Enko gave him. We're taking a test tomorrow. Naruto said, changing the topic. Ah yes, the genin graduation. Enko nodded. Did he say anything about it? Only to meet at training ground 7 at 5 a.m. and to not eat breakfast. Naruto replied. Enko chuckled. Wow, it's no wonder so many people fail his test if he gives instructions like those. What are you gonna do about it? Naruto frowned in thought. Well, I'm definitely not going to skip breakfast. If the test is as hard as he says it is, and he's as good as you told me, I'm going to need all the energy I could get. Enko nodded her head, pleased to see the blonde was getting smarter. Ever since she saw the books his Kage Bunshin were reading, Enko had taken to testing the knowledge and ability to analyze information properly during their spars. If he got one of the questions she asked wrong, or if he was unable to analyze her body language and look underneath some of the statements she made, he would get punished. This normally just consisted of her kicking his even worse than she would have otherwise. Enko went under the motto that the best way to learn anything was to inflict enough pain on someone that they would never forget. It seemed to work well because Naruto would always remember what she told him or what his clones read, for fear that she would stomp a mud hole in him if he failed to meet her expectations. As for the time, to be honest, I'm not sure. If he's as intelligent as you said, this may just be part of the test. We'll show up late, thinking that's what he's gonna do, then he shows up early and berates us for being late. Enko scoffed. Trust me on this, Kakashi may be smart enough to pull that off, but he lacks the motivation to try that hard. She looked at him and shook her head. Never figured you for such a heavy thinker. She teased. Hey, I think. Naruto shouted at her, his glare only causing her to laugh. That's it. Naruto lunged at Enko while she just smirked. The rest of the day Naruto spent it trying to beat Enko, with no luck whatsoever as she proceeded to beat the crap out of him.